called Art and Culture, Soft Power for Influence and Change. Sorry, this is kind of, there we go. So I'm going to first just introduce myself briefly, and then every panelist will introduce themselves. So, my name is Vanessa Arelle. I'm the co-founder of Welcome Chaos that produced the Extreme Hangout second year here. And it's a real honor and privilege to be able to work with Amber and the team, to be able to take a lot of this content onto COP and a global stage, because we believe Portugal is really in a privileged position to make a great difference in the world. But apart from that, what do I do? And that's always a really hard question to answer. If anybody asks my kids, what does your mom do? They're like, yeah, she does a lot. So, it's a complex system of working with different interests, different parties from government, private sector, and the nonprofit organizations, normally connecting them. So that's the easiest way to explain what I do, but we're not here because of me. We're here because of these incredible human beings who have great influence on us through the art forms that they do or through their own practices. So I'm going to start by introducing Elson, or asking Elson to introduce himself and the remarkable work that he does as a businessman, as an art patron, as an art collector. There's a lot here. Yes. So please.
So I am Elson. I'm from Angola. I grew up in Paris. So I have Portuguese and Angolan roots. And I create the last 6 years 2 platforms, art platforms. The first one is the Not Museum. Not Museum is a lab. When I arrived in Lisbon, I felt it was a missing place of expression for artists from Africa. So I create this space, Rua Castilho, number 3. It's a space, so during 6 years, I invite several galleries and artists, and I did several exhibitions during 6 years. Another platform that I create is the World African Artists United. World African Artists United is a platform online for Afro-descendant artists that give them the opportunity to have a space to be represented. So in this platform you can find all the Afro-descendant artists, curators, residents. Every day you have all the information about exhibitions around the world. And aside of that, I am as well a businessman. I have a company, the name is Maxto. So I am a property investor in Portugal. The last 3 years I won the best prize of sale for rehabilitation projects in Portugal. I have also some projects in Germany, in Switzerland, in Vienna, and in Spain. Yeah. Wow. I stop here.
That's a lot. And, there's also, your support for Arco Lisboa.
Yes, of course, I forgot. So since 5 years, I work with Arco Lisboa. I'm part of the committee of the art fair. So it's one of the biggest international contemporary art fair. We have Arco Madrid and Arco Lisboa. So since 3 years, I'm the main sponsor of the Arco Lisboa. I organize as well the talks. So this year, I organize 3 talks that we invite curators from Paris, from New York, to talk about all the narratives about the transatlantic, all these problematics that also invite, especially the curators that they are responsible of the acquisition in the museum. So they made this selection. For us, it's important to have a good relationship with them, to introduce the new artists from Africa to this place, to the museums.
Oh, fantastic. And I think on that note, there's a very seamless transition over to Ekua, because I believe you participated in one of those, correct?
Yes, so I'm very grateful to have been invited to one of the panels that was sponsored by Elson and Art Mexto this year at ARCO. But besides that, so my name is Ekua Yankah. I'm German Ghanaian. I'm trained as a social scientist and I worked in the UN system for many years. But I've sort of made a switch. I call myself a social entrepreneur. And I've been living in Portugal for almost 4 years. And I help build the ecosystem around art and creativity. So that means that I work with young artists or curators to try and see how we can bring more diversity into the art ecosystem. And one of the innovations that I created is the Diaspora Salon in Lisbon. And it's basically a virtual community and networking space, platform for the various diasporan communities that exist in Lisbon and beyond Lisbon to come together and create together. What else do I do? I also sit on the board of Hangout. Hangout is an independent art organization here in Lisbon. And I also sit on the board of Anogana. Actually, the founder of Anogana is sitting at a table back there. Anogana is important because they were the 2-time curator of the Ghana Pavilion in Venice. And I also sit on the board of Savvy Contemporary in Berlin, another independent art organization that's really helped shape the way, the discourse around contemporary art. And what's important is that Bonaventure, who's the founder of Savvy Contemporary, is now who was named the chief curator of the Sao Paulo Biennial. So we'll be seeing a lot of the work that was developed in Germany over the last 15 years, also reflected on an international stage.
Great, thank you, Ekua. And now Claudia.
Can you hear me? Does it work? Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm a Franco-Colombian photographer living in Portugal since 8 years. I'm presenting some of my works that I did during a 2-year period here in Portugal on trees and forests. This came about when I read a book by a German forest engineer called Peter Wolleben that he wrote on trees called The Hidden Life of Trees. And I was fascinated by what he was saying about the way they communicate. Trees are today, that we know, are very important to us in terms that they are the ones that participate in the ecosystem, absorbing most of the carbon dioxide, which allows us, of course, today to breathe and to be here on this earth. Through these images, I really want the viewer to be aware and that we need to preserve and respect and protect these living organisms. So I wanted to some of the photographs that
We're going to do that after. We're just doing little introductions now.
Okay, great. So I'll show you then the photographs afterwards.
Yeah. And then we have Paulo.
Can you hear?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Now?
Yes. Okay. My name is Paulo Arraiano. I work as a visual artist. The basic word is a visual artist, but I also run a residency program in the Azores Islands on climate crisis and natural and human diasporas. I've been working with the idea of urban acupuncture and visual seismography for a long, long time. And all these themes of climate crisis, pan-oceanic thinking, and the diasporic studies melt together, and the extension of the work become a residency on and on. So I also collaborate with various curators and foundations and entities to rethink the idea and the role of the artists and the institutions and the way that the story is told. So mainly is this.
Thank you, Paulo. And last but not least, we have Rayad.
Cool. I'll keep it short and sweet. Hello, everyone. I like to think of myself as a storyteller. An ecopreneur now meets art activist. I had a food waste company prior, and now I'm focusing on making mixed media art through upcycling different means of waste. But the common thread between all of my work is challenging people's perspective on waste and having people reimagine the idea of waste in the sense that it's only waste if someone wastes it, and whether that's through business, storytelling, or through art, that's the medium of which I found and I use.
Amazing, thank you. So just to start, I'm going to define a couple of words. So first of all, soft power. I don't know, have you guys heard about soft power before? Any of you? Any hands? So I'm going to have to read this one out. But soft power means to attract or co-opt rather than coerce. Using force, no wait, sorry, I'm going to do this again. Attract or co-opt rather than coercing, using force or money as means of persuasion. And I know this is going to trigger a conversation here, so let's just put it there. Aligning preferences, needs, and wants through appeal, attraction, using culture, media, and policy. So just to define what is soft power. And the other one is influence. So the capacity to have an effect on the character, development of behavior, on someone or something, or effect within itself. So two very foreign terms, but that are very interrelated. So I just wanted to define that. I'm going to ask specific questions to each one of the panelists. And after that, we're going to go back to these topics and see how everything interlinks in the work from a patron, philanthropist, collector, to the curator, board member, supporter of the art communities, to the photographer, to the urban acupuncturist, which I love that word. I think we debated this the first time we met. And yourself as the what was it? It's a great word. Ecopreneur, now art activist. So we have a lot of different terms that allow us to move through things. So I just wanted to ask Elson. We're going to start with you, sweetheart. So with your vast experience in the arts, as a patron, to a collector, to a curator, an entrepreneur, your commitment to culture and diplomacy go hand in hand. How do you see your role evolving in this space when considering the planet and the current situation? Not necessarily just environmental. This could be social, this could be political, this could be financial. So I just wanted to maybe tap into your thoughts about that a bit.
So, first of all, I believe that a world without art is a world without soul, and without future, and without freedom. Art is a vehicle of culture, and I think the culture is empowerment for people and open their minds. And in the world where racism and extremism are starting to have a strong presence, especially now, recently, with the actuality. Place like Not a Museum that I launched a few years ago, and the platform WOW, the World African Artists United, are an example because they are space that help.
You want me to hold it for you?
Yes, they are space to break the barriers, to build a bridge, and most important, are safe place to expression for those who don't have a voice.
Yeah.
This is the reason I create this space, to give a voice for all these artists. We need to create this space like here. And a space of expression are still controlled by an elite that continues to protect the false colonial narratives. Until today, you have this situation. That's why the role of the artists are very important. It's very important to have these artists because they, and the curators, of course, they do the rehabilitation of the history and peacefully.
That's interesting. Rehabilitation of history. I've never heard it said like that. It's actually really cool.
In a peaceful way.
Yeah, peaceful way, of course.
Yes.
But that's why it's soft power, right? Not force.
Yes, exactly. So you must restore the identity that was lost, even destroyed, and erased from the books by the colonial powers. We have the obligation for the generation to come, and your kids, your oath, must rebuild themselves based on real reference and narratives. So you have this obligation because unfortunately you cannot find this on the manuals and the books. So it's our role to do that for them.
I mean, I don't know here in Portugal, I'm going to interrupt you, I don't know here in Portugal, but in Mexico, when I was in primary school, every school in the country used the same book. And I'm sure the content was like, you know, if I was studying there in, say, 1990, this I'm going to give away my age, but, you know, say in the early 90s, it was exactly the same book that my cousin that was 10 years old, 10 years older, remembered. The drawings, everything. It was the most surreal thing. So it's like history kept on repeating itself because the content wasn't updated or diversified.
And with the narratives from the winners.
Yeah.
So I think we have to stop being just spectators. And you live in the structural and educational, very racist society. I don't know if you feel that, but if we can look around. And for me, it's not normal that you have only one African woman that is here. And for me, it's not normal when I go to a restaurant. I am the only one. This affects me, affects my family, affect my nephews, because they don't find reference anywhere. They don't find reference in the books. They don't find reference in the museums.
But they find them in your projects.
Yes, exactly.
So that's why you're doing this.
So you need to understand that you can all be part of this solution. So all together, we can to be involved ourselves to build together a better future for the next generations. This, after year, is our role to change. We cannot wait the politics to work in this. You need to decolonize the books, the museums, and the history. If you. And it's your job to educate and to teach our kids, our family, our friends, because we can't wait we can't wait for the politics to do that. Art and culture stand as witness of our civilization, of our time, of our past, and the history of the humanity. That's why freedom of expression is very important, and the art has to be for everyone. This is a big problem, that the art is not for everyone. Art is most of the time for elites. The art needs to be for everyone and not controlled by an elite group. Art and culture are the most important form of expressions. We all have a duty to protect this form of expression.
And thank you, Elson. So that actually is quite interesting because I think, Ekua, you and I have had a few conversations on this topic of, you know, the inequalities within art, but on every level, right? Access, representation, pay. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's sort of a microcosm of the global situation, really. But there's a very interesting project that you and I discussed a few months ago, which is, you know, the greenhouse, which was the theme of the Portuguese pavilion at this year's Venice Biennale. And I'd love for you to explain to all of us, because it brings it back to the core theme of what is Extreme Hangout, is, you know, what is the link to ecology and ecologies of care? Because here's another interesting topic. We're picking up a lot of really cool words, guys.
Thank you, Vanessa, and also thank you to Elson for your statement, because it's so important. And we met in Venice, actually, at the pavilion. And it was really a moment of being so proud, right, for what Portugal brought into the world this year. I think there's many reasons why this pavilion has really written history. It's called Greenhouse because it was based on the concept of the Creole garden. So it's a concept by Edouard Glissant, who's a philosopher, writer, poet from Martinique who lived in France, and came up with this idea of the Creole garden. And the Creole garden is a space that was created by those who were former enslaved, where they deliberately grew crops that were monocultural, so it was a diversity of crops. And they did that as a means of survival, but also to create the future. It was also a space of liberation. And so the beauty of this year's Portuguese pavilion is that they literally created gardens inside of this very traditional kind of like colonial space that is the Palazzo Franchetti that the Portuguese government, rents every year. And so with the Creole garden, it was an attempt to reverse and to show a different form of history. The other important thing is that they blurred the lines between curator and artist. So oftentimes what happens is that you choose a curator is chosen that then chooses an artist. But in this year's selection, one of the artists, Monica de Miranda, deliberately wanted to blur the line between artist and curator, and she invited 2 other artists to join with her as artist-curator teams. And so that's very important because they really intentionally got rid of that hierarchy. And the other important thing is that they were 3. So it was not just one, curator and one artist, but they were 3, and they came from interdisciplinary disciplines. So Monica is a visual artist, and there was Sonia Vaz-Borges, who's a historian, a militant historian, and Vanya Gala, who's a choreographer. And also to say that contemporary art is not just defined to a single way of producing art, right? That they all intersect. And so what these women did is that they not only created a place of exhibition, but they also created a place of assembly. So the Creole Garden was an exhibition space, it was an assembly space, and it was a space of learning on pedagogy. So they really inverted so many of the traditional notions that you would see that come with a national pavilion. And they also blurred the lines of what nationality means.
They were decolonizing art.
I think more than that, I think they really created a new language. More than decolonized, they really inverted. And so all of these artists that were chosen, or the artist-curator teams were, a mixture, were hybrids, Portuguese Angolan, Portuguese Cape Verdean, Portuguese Angolan living in London. And it shows that, where do the lines of a country start and where do they end, right? Because this was a representation of Portugal that hadn't been seen before. It was essentially 3 Black women who created the kind of artistic expression that is normally not seen in Portugal, that people wouldn't recognize of Portugal. And it's a very important platform, and in the sense that, there's the inversion, there's the intersectionality, there's the inversion of hierarchies, and also they invited other pavilions to participate with them. So along the 9 months of the pavilion, there's a discursive program that invites other thinkers and artists to be part of them. And that's also the legacy that Hangout brings with it. So they invited Dr. Deborah Willis, who's a very well-known American photographer, Hashim Khalidi, who was the curator of the Belgian pavilion, Bonaventure Ndikung, who is the founder of Savi Contemporary, Paula Nascimento, who was an Angolan curator. They were all invited to come and speak on these ecologies of care, and that was the care. That the National Pavilion became a place of assembly to talk about how Portugal goes beyond its borders.
Well, so we could say basically that, wow, and for example, the work that Elson is doing and what this pavilion represented is an extraordinary example of soft power.
Yes, I think that it even became, soft power is also undermining what that power is. I really think that it was more than just soft power. And it's still there. So
well,
you can
influence. We can still go, I think it's till November, right?
Till November.
Till November. So anybody planning a trip to Venice, or if you have time, highly recommended. And now we're going to go on to Claudia, which I think there's also an interesting transition here, which the trees communicating and observing our ecosystem in one way, as after having been able to create and bring these voices from
which is
different places
amazing
on.
to know that, for the Portuguese pavilion in the Biennale of Venice, to have done that greenhouse, that's amazing. And like I was saying earlier on, the idea to photograph these trees came after this book. that was a real revelation for me on that, wow, they do communicate between each other, they protect each other. And I said, okay, I'm going to start this expedition across Portugal, because I live here now. And I even went to the Azores as well. And even searching for very old trees. And I came up with this group of photographs that I showed 2 years ago in Casa de América Latina. And it's true that for me, one of the photographers that also inspired me and influenced me to do this is Sebastián Salgado, with his Genesis work, where he has photographed very, very beautiful, pristine places and indigenous cultures, so that we can be aware that we have to protect all that. And even so, in Brazil, I don't know how many hectares he bought next to Minas Gerais, and he actually planted trees there. Mm-hmm. And today it's a forest. And I think that's such a fantastic message, a message to give to to the people, and to really be aware that we need to protect this for our future generations, to protect our trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind showing us, Claudia?
Yes, of course. So how can we?
I think Olivia's going to give us a hand there.
Okay, so this one, it's what you call in Portuguese azinheira, which is a home oak, 150 years old, which is in Monte Barbeira, the south of Portugal. Actually, it took me a while to find it. It is, you can find it on Google, but it's not like you arrive with a car and it's right there. No, you have to look for it inland. And I said, okay, it should be that one, because that was like the biggest one that was around. So that's one of them. Then should I just go like that here afterwards? Can I use this? Okay, this is a giant fern tree that I took in the Pena Palace Park, which is, yes. And actually what I found out is that a lot of these trees were imported from Australia. And they just, and now they are part of that beautiful, Pena Palace Park, which was amazing. So that's another one. Then you've got, this is in Azores in Pico da Vara, which is the highest peak in São Miguel, which is one of the forests as well, which is amazing. I mean, I just found that also amazing. This is also in the Azores in Pico da Vara.
This is a great way to get to see the country.
Yes.
I'm going to become a photographer. Yes, I'll tag along to the next one.
This is Terra Nostra, also in São Miguel. This is a camphor tree, which is like one of those Walt Disney films of trees that when they talk, it just reminds me of that, nearly that he can sort of like move his arms and talk. That is, it's called also rosewood. It's actually originally from South America, this tree, and this is tree I photographed in the Botanical Tropical Garden of Lisbon.
So I'm going to interrupt you, Claudia, for a second. This is interesting. So this tree is from Latin America. So a lot of these trees have been imported to Portugal, but they've become part of the landscape without necessarily being recognized, which links up to what Ekua and Elson were saying.
It's like the jacarandas. I mean, the jacarandas that we now see all over. Lisbon and south of Portugal, and they were all brought from South Brazil because they're actually originated from that part of the world, Brazil, south of Brazil and Argentina. Mm-hmm. And this is, of course, the national tree, besides the olive tree, the cork tree in Alentejo, which I thought is important to also photograph this. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claudia. So now I'm going to take it to Paulo. So we'll go back to the Azores, because I think we've known each other now for a few years. And I think, do you mind just telling them about the project you did in the Azores with the audio and in the tunnel of the volcano?
Yeah, but But actually,
Don't tell me it was there. Sorry, I totally messed up. Made a mistake with emails, and we don't have the presentation that Paulo was going to talk
they
about.
have it, but even if, whatever. But this is, the Azores started, well, the art world is one thing, to create art or to speak art is another. So the Azores started when I get totally rid of, I don't know how to, so, oh, but this is, you know, my personal as an artist, so everything is connected. But going to the trees and going to the Azores thing is, the Azores started when I left the studio and started using the landscape as a studio. I was fed up of creating just objects and just exhibiting in museums and galleries, and it didn't make sense for me anymore. To speak about trees or to speak about whales or to speak about people or to speak about anything and to be stuck and not observe and not to be in presence. Okay, so I always play with the word. Vanessa knows the expression visual autism, you know, to get an autistic aspect of the idea of the sublime. You know, you see, you think, you represent something, and then it didn't make sense anymore. Also, because of the art world is a very specific place, and as Ekua said, you know, the boundaries between what is a museum, what is an artist, what is a curator, what isn't. It didn't make sense anymore for me. Although I work in the system, although I work as an artist, I needed more. And the Azores started as a reference. My background, my family, part of it comes from Argentina, from Las Pampas. My grandmother was in Las Pampas, indigenous. And then the reaction that the first time that I put my feet on that island, on that archipelago, was, okay, this is a bit of everything. You know? A bit of Africa, a bit of South America, a bit of Europe, and histories, at least natural history, it's still here. The example that you were talking about, the trees, and Ekua and Elson talking about the diaspora and the Creole gardens and everything, you know. Like the Azores is a testing tube of colonization, you know, regarding plants, regarding, you know, people that were enslaved in and taking care of plants. For example, these trees that you were photographing were trees that were to create colonial gardens and test gardens here in Lisbon, but they had to go to the Azores to adapt the climate and all these issues. So I've started a laboratory with friends 12 years ago, and then it came a residency program. I stopped doing this with friends as a test tube and said, okay, let's do it properly, let's invite curators, and then they follow along. It's a hub, it's a rock in the middle of the Atlantic that invites people from different continents to actually decolonize the idea of what is actually the art world, what is an island, and what is a residency program. So that specific place, what we did, we were working with Paul José Contreras from Ecuador, Regina de Miguel, and Jacob Stissen Janssen, I don't know how to pronounce. And they all work in natural diasporas and in climate crisis, and with the extremely idea of no border through oceans, of pan-oceanic thinking.
Yeah.
And this is something that, like, we are in this moment discussing borders everywhere, and in one rock where it can just blow any time, we did a residency program inside of a volcano. And it was very intense. It was forbidden by law, by any laws. So, and then from that experience, we did a lot of investigation with biologists, scientists, curators, from underwater experience, so in the end, it's like a big melting pot of ideas between these themes that we've talked about.
No, it's amazing. And actually, I think I had just really briefly, because I'd love to hear, but I'll go back to it because I think this applies to the three artists over there. But Ray, you're an artist, an activist, ecopreneur. Well, yeah, we're going to come back. Okay, let's do this. Sorry.
I don't know how to take it off, sorry.
No, they'll do it for us.
Okay.
But I'm just curious, how did it all begin? I mean, you've just won a residency. You've just come back from 4 months in Bali with Rip Curl, is it? I don't want to mess up the brand. Yes. And but you work with trash and you make beautiful things out of it. So I'm curious to know, how did it all start?
For me, it started, I kind of mentioned before, I had a food waste business where I had partnered with different restaurants in the US and collected their surplus food at the end of the night, upcycled it, dehydrated it, and we actually turned it into cookies. Because how do you make food waste sexy? Cookies. Everybody loves cookies. So we had that business. And that had really taught me if I were to just preach to all of you about food waste and statistics and cold hard facts, yeah, it might impact some of you, maybe the more scientific minds, but that won't move you, that won't shake you, right? But when I offer you a product or I show you a solution in the cutest, yummiest form, you're way more susceptible to being interested in solutions yourself or to open up that dialogue and that conversation. So for me, that sparked a really big opening in my path of thinking, wow, okay, so this is soft power. I almost think it's soft activism, but extremely potent activism, right? And so then we can go ahead and play the slides, but the first art piece I had ever done, this was just a project of myself. I decided one year, every year I challenged myself for New Year's, and one year I said, hey, I'm gonna go plastic free for a year. And the thing that I couldn't get rid of were these stinking little stickers on produce, and I had them everywhere. And so I ended up just like stacking them on my fridge, and then one day I was like, wow, these are from all over the world. And then I just placed them, and I first placed them in the countries of which they were coming from, and then they ended up being so much, and then my roommates got involved, and my neighbors got involved, and we'd always come and like place them, and it's a pretty large piece. I had posted that on social media, again, the power of influence, and that had influenced me. It got a lot of good feedback. I would say it went like mini viral, and I'd said, oh wow, people really like this. And at the same time, I was posting eco-sustainability content, but this was getting way more attention. So I was like, okay, so we're onto something here. And then the very next piece was the cigarette wave that I just collected. Every day I went on a walk and picked up just one cigarette. So if you think about the magnitude of how many days this took and how many cigarette butts that is, it's quite a bit. And then that kind of branched out, and as I was evolving and seeing the power of, the soft power of art and seeing how it can really move people from the inside out and stir people's emotions, that got me thinking, hey, why don't we do this but larger and around campaigns and around the communities? And I think, was it 3 or 4 panels ago, community was the main focus within that panel, was the underlying theme. And then I'll go ahead and play the next video just a second, but, oh, play now. This was the project I just recently did in Bali, and although it's a mixed media, so there's acrylic and then there's plastic fishing nets that are all part of the green, and that'll kind of be explained in the video, but this piece was involving many people, and in terms of culture, this was a really cool piece because we had hired 10 women in this small, tiny, remote village in Bali, and they had never left outside this village, nor have ever been to a Rip Curl store themselves. But when Rip Curl asked me to make an installation for their store, I was like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to bridge the gap. And these women worked endlessly. And I think with this piece specifically, what I really wanted to highlight was the power of community. I could not have done that by myself. And the greatest achievements of human history have come from collective unity. And so this piece really stands as a kind of a symbol of what we can do on a global scale. If we could all come together to make this piece, imagine what we can do when we rally for the climate change or to end this genocide or so on and so forth. So you can go ahead and play the video, and it kind of like explains a little bit more. I think there's sound too, so yeah. Thousands and thousands of hand-stitched knots. And that was a really cool experience for them to also see that the magnitude of which we can work together to make a piece. And then we can skip to the next slide if you want. This is one of my favorite pieces, and this was raising awareness around Endangered Species Day and around plastic. And you wouldn't think polar bears and plastic water bottles have a lot in common, but throughout this piece, and we did some articles and photojournalism to kind of go along with this as well, but we'd also partnered with Harris. He's an incredible Indonesian artist, and at the time he was getting a lot of press, he had a lot of influence in social media, so I really wanted to pull him into this world as well. And the brand Ekua is the #1 plastic polluter in Indonesia. It's owned by Danone. And so this was kind of raising awareness through them, of kind of nudging them like, hey, through soft power, we can kind of put some pressure on Danone. And we had sent them this video and sent them this statistic. Still waiting to hear back. So we'll let you know how that goes.
That's when you know you're doing so well.
Oh, yeah.
When either they attack you or they don't reply, you know you've done something right.
Yeah.
Can I just ask if we can go back to Paulo's pieces? Because on you showing this, I sort of jumped into something Paulo was doing on the Azores. But I'd love for Paulo to talk to us a little bit about his work. And then I want to have a conversation with you guys. But, where's the influence? You have a very, you each have a message, but how can, say, us on this side of the room or on this side of the stage support you guys better, for example? So if, Paulo, you want to tell us a bit of the work that's up there?
Oh, this. Actually, it was a very strange work to be presented because it was during COVID. I wrote an essay after working with the satellites, with NASA and everything, and I wanted to stop work because it didn't make sense to do nothing. And it made a lot. I thought about breathing a lot, and I had a problem, back there in the Azores while diving. And I had my ear broken, and the lungs were not feeling well, and everything. And I was COVID was happening, and so I created this idea of a virtual mantra about the idea of breathing. And it was a piece that was designed to be distributed on your phones, and it was called Inhale, Exhale, Self-Breathing Kit, and it was like a text around the idea of not giving respect to the landscape, not giving respect to the oxygen layers that we produce and destroy every single day. And it was very specific. And then you would have this work on your cell phone every time that you would feel that you would need space to breathe. And as soon as we had after the first lockdown, there was a curator and this collection, Travessa de Ermida in Lisbon, invited me to present something. And it was very strange, what will I do? Because I don't want to produce, had nothing to produce. And I thought, okay, I will use this space as like a small temple, like a small breathing space. So you couldn't be together in a gallery, so I used this hermit in Lisbon, small. And it was like this idea of a totemic lead wall where you would stay one by one, and have this small breathing space, this oxygen mantra about something that was going around, and it went to everyone. Because in many times, most of my works are between, they are not representing the landscape. They are kind of part of the landscape. And this was a landscape within a landscape, like a tube within a tube, where oxygen was...
So it actually, something came up. Representing a safe space. What does that say? Like, I know Ekua will probably, you know, art and culture as something that represents a safe space. When we know the reality is that there's censorship, a lot of it, there's politics, there's interest, there's financial interest. But as a concept, how could we actually achieve that? You know, if we're here talking about sustainability, it's not just environmental, but it's also social. Across the boards for humanity. How can we use art and culture, soft power, all of these great attributes that we have on stage? Whoever thinks of something that you want to share, how can we use that better? How can we have greater influence? How can we bring about change faster? And actually, not just like talking the talk, but doing it, like walking the walk. How can we start creating a wave of change? Any of you? Whoever's inspired.
There's one word for me, you know, and it's degrowth, only. The only word that comes to my mind is degrowth. You know, we are game over. This is game over. And if we don't go back and use degrowth as a weapon, you know, it's just we need to delay it. But how? So for me, it's, I don't know. What do you think?
Ekua?
No, I think you're right. I think that, you know, we can't keep projecting, more growth, more, more revenue. You know, we have reached the point where we can't do more. We have to actually scale down. But the other thing that is very important, me coming from Germany, and a lot of interesting things happening in Germany now, is the freedom of speech. I think, to me, that's why art is such a sacred place. People need to be able to use their voices to create and to criticize and challenge and come up with new ideas. That's the very crux of why we need art and culture. And that space is being challenged in many countries at the moment.
Elson, I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Yes, you need to create more space because every day I saw that our rights are not guaranteed. You saw the problems about les abortions aux États-Unis, and the rights of women, the rights of humans that you fight for a long time are not anymore guaranteed, and you need to pay attention in this. And I like the fact the artist and the curator you work with, they talk about all these narratives. And it's a soft way to try to explain to people that you need to continue the fight.
But it's the courageous soft way, I would say. It has to take a lot of courage for a curator or an artist to really be, putting your heart on your sleeve. I've always said that artists are probably some of the bravest people because it's almost like their soul is being exposed to the world. How you feel, how you think, how you process things, what you want to be seen and heard. And sometimes it's not even heard. The storytelling part is super important. So I don't know if somebody wants to pick up on the theme of storytelling, because your work, Ray, for example, and the storytelling part in the most beautiful way, because visually it's beautiful, but it's made of horrific material. So that sort of extreme there's a word, sort of like it's the opposites, with a great balance of beauty. And I think there's a lot of power there from your side, and a lot of power from your side as curators and patrons and facilitators of this sort of cross-sector dialogue and presentation. So, anybody want to have a go at that? If anybody wants to ask anything to the artist, by the way, we can just like have a conversation, like say this is the living room. So if anybody has a question for the artist, or anybody have a comment about this whole concept, especially with I'm going to challenge. The visuals of yesterday, of the assassination attempt on Trump. Okay? Let's just put it out there. They're very interesting, references to the American flag in the visuals that are kind of positioned around. I was having a conversation with someone who pointed it out. The flag is kind of upside down. There's a few references to iconic visuals. And there's also like the flag in a hand in the same kind of position. So, these are visuals that are coming out at us and things that we're looking at. So I was just wondering if anybody had noticed that and the potential power that can have in terms of messaging, to the American people, to the voters, and to the world. So, just putting something out there.
Vanessa, you put something out there?
Yeah, sure, here.
Okay. Well, But in terms of change, I mean, I've worked with Paulo, and we worked in an important public project in Palacio de Pena a couple of years ago, which I think had a huge influence on me and Paulo in terms of artists do have a huge responsibility. And I'm not just talking about plastic artists, I'm talking about writers, I'm talking about journalists. We record, as Yankah said, we record history.
Yeah.
And we have, I was just having in a very important meeting last week, our responsibility, especially musicians, I mean, all of us, we influence masses. But the reality is, and right now, what I think, and it has nothing to do with art, but if we want huge change to be done, especially on building forests, I do believe in making forests private, getting investors to buy land and build and plant, like Sebastião Salgado.
I agree with you.
Because politics right now, it's tricky. It's tricky. And if you do really have the money to invest, and if you really want to make change, it's all of us. But it's more on the community.
Yeah.
And so
yes,
that's
but
my
community
2
creates
cents.
silos. So, you know, this is one of the things that I'm very passionate about, which is silos. Communities, all communities have silos. You have the artists, and within the artists, you have the musicians, you have the writers, you have different artists, and sometimes that's why this Venice project is so beautiful, because they're cross-pollinating, they're working together with a different type of synergy. May I have that for Elson, please? Thank you. In a different type of energy that just kind of, it creates the fluid conversation. We seem to all be stuck just talking.
Right. That's
So, but Ray did. Oh, there we have Nana.
We have to have that 1% of having the courage.
Oh, we've got courage right there.
Hi, everyone. I actually have a question for you, Paulo, in terms of what you just said about degrowth. So I've worked for a really long time in the Ghanaian contemporary art context. And when I first started working in the African art world, which was almost 20 years ago, there was no money in it. And everybody who worked in that sphere was very, very, very passionate and really it was kind of like a family. Everybody was really passionate. When I went back to Ghana and you know, all of us who were working within the Ghanaian art sphere were working at lifting it up. And then I curated the Ghana Pavilion at Venice and did the last one with Ekua as well. And slowly we moved towards the center. From like where we were at the margins, we moved towards the center, and we were successful. We achieved like enormous success. The Ghanaian artists now are some of the most successful African artists there are. What I realized in that process was that success entailed mimicry, or entailed the kind of the replication of systems that were broken. What ended up happening is that with the kind of visible success that we had, all the commerce and all the money started coming into the Ghanaian art scene, and what ended up happening is a machination or a kind of factory producing of art. And so when you said degrowth just now, it kind of caught my imagination, because what we ended up doing by creating success was, in a way, replicating the systems of destruction. And so where we are right now is we haven't gone as far as the art world in other places. For example, I feel like if you go to London or New York or the art centers there is a kind of exhaustion of spirit. There is a kind of emptiness of, you know, the kind of running on empty where people are still trying to create, but underneath it, there's a kind of, like an emptiness of something that we haven't quite got to because our success is still so recent. So when you say degrowth, I kind of, I resonate with it, but I'm really wondering, what does that degrowth look like to you?
Well, and honestly, you know, for example, me, actually, even in my practice, I was doing in my studio, I was doing sculptures, I was doing installations, I was working with materials, and then if I was doing like Venice, or if I was doing a show in a museum somewhere else in the planet, shippings, crates, policies, things. If I go and work in situ, if I work with people from there, if I work with them, or I'm already like cutting part of the ecosystem. Also, when I talked about degrowth, it's not only like within my practice or within the art world, it's everywhere, because you were talking about Ghana or Africa in general, they already practice degrowth. They already practice circularity. They already practice, the growth thing, and is connected directly with capitalism in the Western mind, So eventually, we were discussing. I'm working like in a project that is talking about circularity, and everyone has probably know that like an iPhone or something that we have in our pockets, can last 20 years, and the lithium that it has kills thousands of people every single day in the mining in Congo, but we don't care, we don't think about, and how art or how culture or how visual activism or visual poetry or whatever, can at least, put this in the table. And within the practice, within the structure, within the production, within everything, Because as we all know that in the art world is one of the biggest producers of nothing in the world. We don't do nothing, we don't serve for anything. Our objects are useless. And in the end, they are shipped everywhere. We use plastic bubbles for everything. We use wooden trees in crates. And when we are like raising a flag that we are sustainable or whatever, how this has to be changed. And curators like you and other thinkers and actually people like Elson, are the ones that can make change, are the ones that can help us or can help the specific people that can really rip the system. I don't know if this answers or...
And how does it change systemically?
I don't know. I do believe in there's a thing like it's like I remember a Taoist written, or I don't know if it's an haiku poem that says that when you don't instead of propaganda or instead of teaching, you plant a small garden, and then your neighbor would like, whoa, what an amazing garden, and then suddenly we can have like a big forest, And I don't want to be poetic because, and with these themes, I think, unfortunately, we can be a bit, how do you say, like soft, but it's not that soft a problem because, as I told, I use the word game over. I think people didn't realize that this is ending. And we are part of the action.
We're part of the problem. We've inherited the problem. We're leaving a bigger problem for our children and the next generation. But then we have to be part of the solution. And what I'd love to get out of this is, what the hell can we all do? Like those of us that are sitting here, I'm called the soft power expert. I'm a strategy advisor in different sectors. Like, how could I work with you, Ray? How can I help with the work that you do to reach it, get it to people that will be influenced by seeing it? Paulo, the way that you think, Nana, the questions that you're raising, like what can I do? It would be my question. And I'm not going to, put it on Facebook or Instagram. That just goes into the super fast scrolling that the kids do now. Like, what are practical things that we can do, all of us, but that we can do to actually start influencing people? So talking, You've got, can you borrow your microphone, Ekua, please? Like, what can we do?
You are right. You need to start to influence people around us. You need to start with your friends, with your family. And this will be a big start already. And you cannot just say that, I understand when you say it's the end. Because I think the same. We are living the last years of our humanity.
Yep.
And the next generation, maybe you leave the, but until that, we need to work for the next generation to need to do something.
It was said here that we're the ones that are going to go extinct, that we're the ones that are going to perish, not the planet. Gaia's going to keep on evolving and doing her thing. It's us that are killing our kind. So, Ekua, I don't know, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, I actually think that it's that slogan, think global but act local. I think there's so much that can be done in our own communities and our own families. So charity begins at home. And like really make that movement part of your daily practice, you know, the recycling, the shopping local, buying local art.
But I like this thing that was said about the wrapping of the pieces and that they go all over the world and the whole thing and whatever. Like to put out a challenge to the art world to reduce, you know, like, or to report on how much rubbish was there and be somehow, you know.
Or like Paulo said, like he's unwilling for his work to be shipped. So for curators to say, great, come and produce your work, you know, in the exhibition
That's
space.
one of few artists that would say I refuse.
Attacked by the media because I did a show in between Madeira and in the Triangle, and I said it can only be shipped by sail. You know, I don't want to use, and it was just a statement. Of course, it's kind of a romantic thing, but for me, it was a statement. You know, and the policies and the rules and the problems of shipping something simple in a sailing boat was, you know, like it was more expensive than to. So it's from the structure. It's the bone.
But you're an artist. You can get away with poetic. This is where you have soft power. Ray, you wanted to say something, and then we've got a question over there.
I think your initial question was, what can we do?
Yeah.
And I think it's quite simple. We all know people. We're all connected to some extent to different organizations, different brands, people who own or work at different companies. And I think the best thing that we could really do is if you know someone who's doing something or has a campaign that they want to raise awareness for or has an exhibition that they want to do, connecting, using your network to help people connect. And I would say almost, if not every single one of my campaigns or projects has just been because someone has been kind enough to connect me to the right people. So I think it's quite simple in terms of if we're specifically honing in on art world, if you want to support the artists and allow art to continue to grow. And then I also wanted to say something you had asked, how do we make spaces safe for artists? And I want to address the elephant in the room is funding. Right? Like getting enough funding for artists. We value entrepreneurship so much. I came from that world where I was funded by different pitch competitions like Shark Tank and all of that. But the art world is not as equally funded, and I understand that there are major differences. But I think if we really focus on funding art, we can see that systematic change can actually come from that. So that would be my 2 cents within the art world specifically.
We need to worry a little bit, but I'm gonna read the description of soft power again. Attract and co-opt rather than to coerce, using force or money as means of persuasion. So, you know, the elephant was put on the stage at the beginning, but I'm really grateful that you brought it up. And it is a huge problem. And throughout, I think we've been hearing throughout the whole weekend, you know, funding for certain initiatives, for NGOs, we need to find a way of breaking that system and working with it. The kids in Web 3, Web 4 have figured out ways of like hacking the banking system, and they're maybe we should start aligning with them and welcoming them to these conversations to see if they can help us figure out other ways, which is not the obvious old-fashioned means, which is really difficult for everyone. We have a question over there.
Hi. Hello. Hi, my name is Gonçalo. I'm an artist as well. I collaborated with Paulo just recently. And I'm a poet and a visual artist. So you were talking about poetics and being, you know, poetic about this. Actually, Paulo just talked about something very interesting, which is cargo sailing, which sounds romantic, but it's actually a business nowadays in the world. I just founded, just by coincidence, a company with some friends 2 months ago for cargo sailing. So it's happening, it's a thing. But I think this is all very small. This is a very, 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 very tiny impact in the big issue that we're talking about. And Paulo talked about when he was talking, he said two things very important: degrowth, and then he touched the word that for me people seldomly want to touch because it implies a lot of things. But the problem is actually capitalism and the way we organize our society in that sense that we want to generate money. I understand where you're coming from, but entrepreneurship, funding, all of that, it's just another way of capitalistic organization of the world and of economy. And if we organize ourselves for something that expects eternal growth, there's something wrong with this, I think. We know by now. So I think that politics are tricky. I agree with her, but we cannot give up on politics and expect that philanthropists or private institutions buy or take care of anything, because...
But that's changing too. So the philanthropy sector is looking more and more for sustainable practices and sustainable projects that they give donations to, but they don't want to continue putting into an empty money pit.
But you're solving a problem with the goodwill of people that has to be solved systematically with the organization of our economic system. That's the problem.
Yes, but
so
what? Wait, we might have a solution suggested back there. I see a hand. Do you mind grabbing the microphone, please?
Hi to everyone. My name is Ilya, and I heard only last part of this conversation about soft power and influence for everything. I'm from St. Petersburg, from Russia. I went off when the war was started, and now I'm live here for 1 year. And for me, it was really surprised when I arrived to Portugal and found there's a big problem, for example, with the recycling of waste. Because, for example, in St. Petersburg, we have really good guys with, for example, it can be like a solution for change and everything that we can make really popular, for example, recycling. How? You can Google it for, I know, one project, and it has, for example, 2 parts, 99 Recycle, and this another name is Yaburet. The guys, they made the same, that project, sorry, I forgot the name.
Torre Plastic.
Yes, they made different furniture things from these caps. They also made a big 3D printer to print the furniture from these caps. And they make it with an amazing design. You will never recognize that it's a recycled plastic. And also, you can make the really popular recycling with the influence, for example, with different internship, with the companies, and through this way. Because yes, we live in a capitalistic world now, but we can use their soft power through it, through the design, through the influence, through the Instagram, to make new, beautiful, interesting things. Because for average citizen, he or she doesn't know what for they should recycle waste.
Come and see me after, because there's a few projects here in Portugal I'd love to share with you, so you can see what's happening
because
here.
We have, for example, with our project, I work like engineer in Como Labs. We make eco-based MDF, but we change their glue, formaldehyde glue, to their mushroom. And we make a hot press. It has the same strong as the MDF. Mm-hmm. Now we're looking for investments in the US, in the Silicon Valley, and other places. So I think their main idea is about collaborate. Don't be
Would you collaborate with any of the artists here?
Yes, of course, because it's about collaborate. You can collaborate business and art at the same time and make it popular about recycling, about using all the things, about thrift shops, because make popular you can go to any thrift shop for new things. And the same, for example, in St. Petersburg, it's really, really popular to recycle waste, to use new things through it, to use more sustainable solutions. Also, the big tech companies, they're also looking for it.
Yeah.
And,
no, I would personally love to know more about what you're doing with your company. I think it's really interesting, and I'm sure, you know, the artists here, all of us, you know, you're in construction, we all sort of, we want to hear about this, and thank you so much for sharing it. It's fantastic. And I think I want to ask everybody to just, you know, it's a message of hope. You know, for me, it's always hope is the last thing to die, ultimately. And I would love to actually say, you don't have to say it out loud, but I'd love to ask everybody here to just make one pragmatic, practical commitment that we can take away after this weekend, this very long weekend, which is just, you know, so for me, in our house, I'll tell you, we're going to change. There's no more microplastics. We're using no more single-use plastic. And we've been implementing this in the last sort of month and a half, and it feels really good to do it. And I'd be really happy to share with everyone what are the products we're using, because it's 30% cheaper ultimately, and it doesn't have horrible plastic and water that we have to carry around. Everything is like little packages that you mix with water. So for me, that's a simple action. I would also love to you know, learn more. Unfortunately, we don't have hours to be able to sit here. We're very delayed in the day. But I'd love to know, you know, those are my commitments. And my commitment is also to how can I personally be of service to the work that you guys are doing? And how can I support? Which I think is the least that I can do. But I'd love to hear from you guys, you know, one practical thing and something important that might inspire other people here to take away a practice or to offer service or a connection. Nobody wants to commit?
I think I have a negative part. So we need to stop to talk about recycling, and the climate change is too late. We need to be more worried about our rights, because about the climate change is too late, completely too late. We need to fight to keep our rights, because this is more important now, because you are next to a war, the sword, and you need to pay attention. And the way you, with the curators and the artists, that you can change the world is to work with the diplomatics, to work with the politics. You cannot just continue to be alone. We need to do politics. We need to be involved in the association. We need to bring your friends, your family, all of them, and to be involved in all these narratives. Mm-hmm. And for the climate change, it can do nothing for me.
Yeah, I do agree with you. It's something, you know, we can talk about, you know, a lot of green things, a lot of blue things, but please, it's a war. It's a war out there. And there are people dying every single day, and their blood is on our cell phones. It's on our laptops, you know, and what we do the upgrades. And if art, as, you know, we don't throw, you know, bombs into situations like Vanessa said. It's soft. It's a soft way, but it has to be active, and it has to be together as a community, artists with, you know, and destroy also, like you said with the example of the Venice Biennale Pavilion. You know, destroy borders, destroy flags, destroy rivers, destroy, you know, all these divisions, and work together, you know, between patrons, artists, and institutions for this, you know, global issue.
I think I'll sprinkle in a little bit of a more optimistic perspective or point of view. I also agree. I go through my days of doom and gloom, and it is so hard not to witness what we're seeing and happening right now in Gaza and Ukraine and everything and what's going on. But I think our biggest superpower as humans is our ability to work together for a common goal. And typically, in order to get to that goal, it requires some sort of believing into a story. And storytelling is so powerful on our human brains. And some of the best storytelling in the world is religion, for example, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, that is a story we choose to either believe or not believe. But look how many people that mobilizes to work towards one common thing, to go on a pilgrimage, to every week go to a certain institution to pray. So as destructive as that can be, I also believe that it can be a powerful tool. And I think art specifically is the weapon, it's a megaphone through which we can amplify our emotions, but we can also use these stories to mobilize us towards a common goal. And I think similar to social media or AI, it's a tool in which, depending on whose hands it's in, can save a life or kill. And I personally know that the only way I can continue to do the work that I do is believe that there is hope and continue to try to create stories in which we can all rally towards a common goal to end climate change, the genocide, so on and so forth. So I think to end with what can we do, find something that aligns with your values, whether that's climate, whether that's human rights, climate justice, and support the artists, but also something that had already been said on the stage multiple times is kind of join that movement, right? You don't have to be a painter or a mixed media artist or a musician or whatnot, but you can kind of get behind those movements. And I think everyone has their own way to kind of spark that conversation. So I don't know, I think ultimately it's the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we believe, and the stories that we choose to follow are the ones that are going to dictate our world.
Yeah. Claudia, what about you?
Yeah, I was just listening to her, and I think she's right. Yes, it's just stories that we believe. And since if there is hope, that's for me the most important thing, to have hope. I'm an optimist by nature. So when I hear said, okay, climate change is over, no, we still have to fight for it. We have to continue fighting for that. We just can't just give up.
So you would say if we give up on one, it's like we're giving up on the other, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Ekua?
I believe in love. So, I mean, radical love in all senses, self-love and love for the other. And that's the only thing we have to keep us going, right? So.
Thank you. All right, guys, on that note, we're done. Okay. Yes, thank you so much, everyone. I think